Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to First Church. Welcome to First Church of Religious Science in New York City. This is our Louise gathering, our self-healing gathering. We have a title for today. It's titled Speak, Heal, and Remember. This is a special class. We're commemorating September 11th today. So today's class falls on a significant day in our collective memory. September 11th. So before we move into our full teaching on self-expression and personal healing, I want to take a moment to honor this day with tenderness and truth. Many of us remember where we were on that morning in 2001. It wasn't just a tragedy, it was a rupture in the ordinary rhythm of life. Thousands of people left for work that day, and they never returned home. They weren't part of any war. They weren't political figures. They were secretaries and firefighters, chefs, custodians, airline passengers, office workers, mothers and fathers, daughters, sons. And in a flash, the world changed. What was attacked that day wasn't just buildings, it was an idea. The idea of freedom, the right to live, to gather, to speak, to work, to pursue happiness. And yet, somehow, in the aftermath of that great pain, people rose. We helped each other. We lit candles. We stood in silence. We gave blood. We leaned on strangers. We sang songs in the dark. We carried each other through. And in those moments, we found our voices through stories, through silence, through the strength of simply being present. And this evening, tonight, we honor the same courage to speak, to feel, and to heal. So this reminds me of something that we sometimes forget. Freedom is not just a political thing, it's a spiritual idea. It's part of your soul's makeup, your soul's design. Louise taught us that self-expression is vital to healing. So when we silence ourselves, whether because of trauma, when we're, from childhood, or fear, or the pressure to fit in, something inside of us contracts. But when we begin to speak our truth, even quietly, we begin to heal. So this class this evening, on this sacred date, we remember, we honor, and we gently recommit to freedom, not just for nations, but for freedom for each and every one of us. So let's take a deep breath together, and let's carry this spirit into our discussion, into our wonderful gathering this evening. So our work is always going to be about self-love. Our work is always going to be about self-expression, loving the self, and the courage to be fully alive. So let's talk about the kind of freedom that begins inside. For many of us, there's a lingering question in the background. And the question would be, am I really free to be me? Am I free to express myself as I am? Maybe you don't think of it much, but you might ask yourself, can I express what I really feel? Am I comfortable expressing myself? Can I speak my truth and still be totally accepted, totally loved? And often the silent answer is probably not, or not really. I don't feel 100% safe to be that or to speak that. Some of us grew up in homes where children were expected to be seen and maybe not heard. At least that's how the adults would have wanted it. And then some of the parents said that out loud, be quiet. In some families, it just wasn't safe to be different or to be emotional. As kids, we learned what not to say, what not to bring up. We also learned what made people uncomfortable, angry, or disappointed. So we learned to stay quiet, or we learned to talk about everything except what we needed to talk about. And that's not how we came into the world, as these free little expressions of light and wonder and light, as Louise would have described us. Louise reminds us that we all began as radiant beings of light, You'll read it in You Can Heal Your Life. You come in full of wonder. You were born shining. You were unapologetic. You were alive. You had your needs met. When you were little, your joy filled the room. The adults were cooing around you and clapping and talking to you. And if you were upset, everybody knew, the whole room knew about that also. There was no hesitation. There was no filter. But somewhere along the way, something has shifted in most of us. We got socialized, or we started getting socialized. Some people call it, we got domesticated is another way of saying it. We learned, again, what is acceptable. We learned what gets rewarded. We also learned what got rejected. And eventually, many of us bought into it, or we buy into it. We adjust, we dim our light, we round out the edges, we try not to rock the boat. And of course, there's exceptions. I can think of someone who was raised by two religious science ministers. And from the beginning, she was told that she was a radiant being of light. She was a radiant expression of creative intelligence, that her voice was important, that her voice mattered, that her life had great purpose. But if we want to be honest, that's kind of rare. Most of us weren't raised with that kind of messaging, with that kind of spiritual foundation. And so we've spent years and decades even trying to rediscover that we're trying to rediscover what was true of us from the very beginning. The truth is, you were always whole. You have always been worthy, and you're free. You've always been free to be exactly who you are. And here's something else we don't say enough. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to outgrow who you were. You're allowed to see things differently. You're allowed to see things differently than your parents or your grandparents or the people who raised you. Even if your family was successful, even if they meant well, even if they gave you a lot, you're still allowed to see more, to stretch further, to become what they couldn't yet imagine. You see, that's not betrayal, that's evolution. That's the soul remembering who it is. Somewhere deep at the center of your being, deep inside, that radiant child still lives. You know, the one who came into the world not to fulfill someone else's script, but the one who came in to shine in their own beautiful way, and to live with joy, to be exactly who you were born to be. You are not here to dim your light. You are here to let that light shine. From Louise, I'm not wrong for being who I am. I'm free to be me. So let's pause for a moment. If you ever felt like your inner voice didn't belong, or if you've learned early on to stay quiet just to keep peace, you could drop a heart into the chat if you're near your computer. Again, if you've ever learned early on just to stay quiet to keep the peace, or you've stifled yourself, you could drop a heart in the chat. Or at least bring the moment to mind. You don't have to explain it. Just acknowledge it for yourself. Because here's the thing. Many of us have been like this. You're not alone. And your healing is holy. This process that you're going through is holy. So let's stay with this thinking for a minute, because some of us, maybe most of us, are still wearing a mask of some kind. Yes, a mask. Not because we're trying to deceive anyone, but because we've learned somewhere along the way that who we really are might not be lovable, might not be acceptable. So we became cautious, we became careful, we became the version of ourselves that wouldn't rock the boat. We learned how to say what people wanted to hear. We learned how to be agreeable. We learned how to earn approval without ever asking for too much. And after a while, we start to believe that's who we are. But it's not. That's just the mask that we learn to wear. If you've ever had the thought, if they really knew me, they would, well, what would they do? They would run or they would leave. Or if you ever thought, if I told the whole truth, I'd lose everything. If you've ever thought thoughts like that, then you know how heavy the mask can become. And the worst part of this, we don't just fear others would run. We start to believe this kind of lie or this stuff ourselves. We start to believe that the real us is too much or not enough or just wrong. But here's what I want to say tonight in this gathering with everything in me. That's not the truth of you. That's the story that you had to tell yourself to get by, to survive. And now maybe it's time to come home to your voice, your real voice. Not the loud voice, not the professional voice, not even the spiritual voice that's trying to say the right thing, but coming home to that innocent voice deep at the center of your being, the voice of the child you once were, the voice that doesn't need to explain anything or justify anything, the voice that still lives somewhere inside of you, just waiting for your recognition and your remembrance, or maybe your discovery. As Louise would say, and I often quote, deep at the center of your being is an infinite well of love. And when you start speaking from that place, even just a little, something begins to happen. You don't feel tense. You don't feel as tense. You don't feel like you're hiding. You don't feel like you need approval. You begin to trust yourself when you're coming from that connected place. You trust the voice that rises from within. And that's the beginning of healing. Here's a simple practice. We can try it together. It's very easy. We just take a quiet moment, take a quiet breath, breathe in and out. You can rest your hand gently on your heart if you're in a place where you can. And if you feel safe, you can close your eyes if you can. But anyway, just focus, take a breath. You could tighten your shoulders and let them drop. And gently inside your mind, you could softly say or repeat, I'm allowed to be me. Followed by, I am not my mask. I am not my fear. And then my voice is needed in the world. My voice is needed in this world. Let's breathe it in and breathe again. Just be here. Breathe again. This is what healing feels like. It's not fireworks or fanfare, just truth. Breathe in and out, soft and steady. And here's something else I've noticed. Maybe you have too. The more you practice this work, this teaching, the more you commune with Spirit, the more you check in, you take these pauses, and the more you connect with your own inner guidance, the less you need outside approval to feel steady, to feel whole. You begin to rely on something deeper. Not reactions, not opinions, but you rely on something deeper within you. You rely on wisdom and on this inner presence. You see, you still live in the world, but you don't get swept up in every wave. You don't take the bait. You don't need to prove your point. As Don Miguel Ruiz teaches in the Four Agreements, you can refuse to be offended, or he would suggest not to take anything personally. When someone tries to push your buttons, for example, you don't need to respond the way you might have before. And they might not know what to do with that when you're not responding, but that's okay. You're not here to be understood by everybody. You're here to awaken, to walk in peace, to love yourself enough to do that. You're here to be a space for healing. You're here to see the divine unfolding in yourself and in everyone. And even when they can't see it yet in themselves, and yes, sometimes we grow past the understandings of the people we love the most. We outgrow the versions of ourselves that people once knew, not because we're better, but because we're becoming more whole, more self-aware. And perhaps that's why Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, to be great is to be misunderstood. Because when you really start to love yourself the way Louise Hay taught us, The need for constant approval begins to slip away. You start living not to be understood, but to be whole. And that is the greatest love of all. Louise would remind you, you have the right to speak. You have the right to be heard. You are a beautiful, unique expression of life itself. So let's take a moment for a pause right now. A pause not to fix anything or force anything. A pause to come back home to ourselves. It's just a short process. You can close your eyes if you'd like. Again, soften your shoulders. Let your hands rest softly. Once again, breathe and feel the breath as it enters. And feel the breath as it leaves. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to achieve. There's just you and the awareness of this presence within. Now imagine yourself standing before a door. And this is not any ordinary door. This is a door that leads to a quiet place inside, a place where truth still lives, a place where your voice still echoes. And as you gently open the door, you find yourself in a soft, radiant room. And know with me that you have this inner sanctuary. And here you feel and are very safe. Here you are held. Here nothing needs to be explained. And in the center of this space, you see the younger version of you. You see the radiant child who once moved freely, danced freely, played freely, cried loudly, and loved easily. You see that child. You see that child who spoke without shame. So let's take a moment now to sit beside them. Offer your hand. Let them feel your presence. You don't have to say anything right away. Sometimes the deepest healing comes in silence. But if there's something you've never been able to say, if there's something, perhaps to a parent or a teacher or to the world, this is your moment. You can whisper it. You can feel it. You can let it rise and fall without fear. And now, listen, not with judgment, not with analysis, just with love. Let the child speak. Let the child speak back to you. What does your inner voice long for you to remember? What truth is ready to rise? Maybe it's something like this. You don't have to perform anymore. You don't have to do anything to earn love. You're already enough. So now breathe again. Bring both hands to your heart gently. And let's speak it together, inside or repeat. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to see peace instead of this. I'm not here to react. I'm here to love. I trust the process of life. And I'm free to express who I truly am. Take another breath and let it be long and kind. And now, as the sacred room begins to dissolve, as you return gently to this present moment, know this. Know that you have not lost that voice. You have not lost that peace. Know that this peace and this voice lives in you still. And the more you practice this listening, this presence, the less the world can pull you off center. You may still live in a noisy world, but inside you, there is a sanctuary. There's a place that no one can shake, and that is your power. So let's bring our hands together now in gratitude for the journey that we've just taken together. As Louise would say, I'm safe, I'm loved, and all is well in my world. And so it is. Welcome back. So let's take a moment now to gather what we've covered and explored this evening, this gathering. This wasn't just a class. This was a remembrance. It's a sacred invitation to return to the truth of who you are. We began with a shared memory the collective ache of 9/11, and the resilience that rose from it. We remembered that freedom isn't just a political idea. It's a spiritual truth. It begins inside of each and every one of us. And we've seen how, over time, many of us were taught to shrink, to stay quiet, to please, to be small. But that's not who you are, and that's not who we are. Not really. You are not your conditioning. You are not your silence. You are not your mask. You are a radiant expression of creative intelligence, and your voice, your true voice, matters greatly. Your feelings are not a problem to fix. They're wisdom that's trying to rise. Your needs are not selfish. They are sacred signals. Your truth, spoken gently with love, has the power to heal. And even when the world feels loud and reactive, you can choose not to take the bait. You can pause, you can listen, and you can speak from a connected place, from peace. This is what Louise Hay taught us, that self-expression is not a luxury. It's a pathway to wholeness. So this evening, this afternoon, may we leave with a deeper commitment to hear ourselves clearly, to speak from our center, and to see with the eyes of peace. So please take a breath and let these words wash over you. You can say them aloud or just hold them in your heart. I'm safe to be who I am. I'm free to express my truth. I listen with love. I speak with clarity. I release the need to react. I choose peace instead of fear. My voice is a blessing to the world, and I trust the unfolding of my life. So let's have a little affirmative prayer before we transition over to all of you. I give thanks for the healing I've received tonight. I give thanks for this gathering. I know that something within me has shifted. I listen more deeply now. I listen more deeply to my heart, to others, to the wisdom of spirit within me. I speak from connection. I speak from peace. I live from truth, and I trust the unfolding of my life. All is well, and so it is. So welcome back. Please stay with us. Tonight's sharing begins now, so I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. So it is. Thank you.